long-awaited Flash movie has finally come out, even though it kind of looked like it wasn't going to at some point. The film was announced before the CW show started, and that show did 9 seasons and finished before this film came out. That's so wild.
I love you!
There's a storm of reviews online for this film. People either love it or hate it, completely on either side of the spectrum it seems, and I'm here to say that everyone is wrong. It's not that great, but it's also not the worst film ever made, because obviously my opinion is the only one that actually matters. Let's get one of the multiple elephants out of the room. First is the fact of Ezra Miller. Yes, he needs to pay for his sins, and any help that he needs, I hope he gets it. Moving on to the next elephant, the CGI is pretty dreadful. We've all known this for a bit, because each trailer kind of looked worse, honestly. And yeah, there are just some video game cutscenes in this film, and it definitely does detract from the viewing. Which sucks because there's also a lot of great shots, and the camera work overall is pretty good, and when there isn't an overload of CGI, the film generally looks pretty good, but there is so much of that PS3 video game aesthetic. But like I say, it doesn't get everything visually wrong, and even some of the effects I love, like the load up effect as Barry gets ready to run, and the world kind of warps around him before he actually starts going. I think is a really cool effect and really makes you feel that kind of speed. And also, as silly as it is, the sequence of him saving all the babies from the skyscraper in that first act, I loved it because it felt intentionally goofy and like embraced its cape shit side in a positive way. And it does that at other times throughout the film, and like does it well actually. Also, the title card deserves an honourable mention because it was actually really creative and pretty funny. Unfortunately though, a lot of the film doesn't really hold up to that. The actual running effects I hate. He's really just gliding across the floor. There doesn't seem to be any weight or any actual impact, and it doesn't work at all, which is kind of important for me because it's a Flash film. He just fucking runs. The concept behind how the Speed Force looks like when he goes to travel back in time in that kind of arena kind of area is cool conceptually, but the effects end up right in the middle of like the uncanny valley, and it's really just haunting to look at. If they'd gone more cartoonish with the style, I think that would have worked even better, but instead it feels like they're trying to find somewhere between like cartoonish and photorealistic, and it ends up just looking like dog shit. We just end up with Scorpion King models of like Henry Cavill and Michael Shannon, and it's horrible.
It's the biggest piece of dog shit.
And that's a case of where if the effects are meant to be how they are, then it just misses the mark by quite a bit. Because obviously Andy Muschietti said some of the weird effects that people have been complaining about are meant to be real and intentional, and obviously I don't buy that. The main reason is obviously the effects artist didn't have enough time, and we can only hope that in the future studios start to give the effects workers much more time on their projects, because they need it, and they're a vital part of the process, and they're all incredibly talented. So just fucking give them the time they need, man. And also just how much they redid of this film, like, you can't be that surprised. Obviously, we have the final battle, which just looks so bad visually. There's no weight to anything, and an aggressively boring setting, and just bad effects overall. Now, it actually makes sense to take place in this, like, desert wasteland, but they could have just moved it, or honestly done anything other than what they did with it. It's the final battle of your movie, with the villains from Man of Steel, which is a visual spectacle, and this was the best you could do? No! Don't do Man of Steel again, of course not, but anything else. I think overall, when the movie embraces being a Flash movie, it's actually pretty good. I think Barry getting annoyed by a younger version of himself is great, and genuinely thought it was really funny a lot of the time. And it also added to the emotional weight of the film that already executes the Flashpoint plot relatively well. I really do feel for Barry and him having to come to terms with the fact that the scars he has are what make him who he is, and that you can't go back and change, you can only move on, as Ben Affleck's Bruce says at the start of the film. And then by the end of the movie, we have the younger Barry who has gained his super speed but has to realise and accept that he can't keep them, and he also can't save everyone. He has to let this timeline, where he's spent a life with his mother and gained the superpowers, he's gotta let it die. When it is a solo Flash film and focuses, it's pretty good, comedically and emotionally. But it's a shame a lot of the film doesn't feel like that. Like, Barry definitely does feel like the focus, but there is just so much DC mess going around that almost feels more important, and so it kind of just lessens how I actually felt. I want to mention the villain quickly, who we don't see in any of the marketing, but it's Dark Flash, who is revealed to be the younger Barry in the future who has spent years trying to save this timeline. Because essentially, no matter what, it's revealed that they can't save this timeline, the outcome is always going to be the same, that Supergirl dies and Zod fucking destroys the world. And this Barry from this world has been trying for God knows how long to save this timeline by going back in time over and over and over again. Which has obviously really fucked him up, and he's got this really cool design, like, he looks awesome, he's covered in shrapnel, and it's just, like, molded to him because of how much he's just been, like, hit with it by going back in time. And his motivations are really well defined. Like, this is, if Barry refused to let go, refuses to move on, this is what happens. But he's genuinely not in the film enough for like more than 5 minutes. 5 minutes he's in there tops, so I just don't care. Like, he's genuinely not in the film enough in this form to matter. Zod is also back for no reason. Michael Shannon doesn't care, and I'm not surprised because he really doesn't do anything in the film. His conflict with Supergirl is set up well, but doesn't really have any payoff. Supergirl and of course Keaton's Batman are in the film and have been the big selling points. Supergirl is a highlight. She is great and a really interesting character who does feel a little bit rushed through, but considering we had a film like Man of Steel that kind of went through these events with him, I can kind of deal with it, even if it doesn't line up very accurately. But she's performed really well, and I hope Sasha Calle stays on for the Supergirl movie that they're going to be doing. She's probably the best part of the movie for me and should have been in it more. Keaton is good. We get some awesome action with him. That is true, just fanboy love.
Let's get nuts.
And I did love it. I'm a fan. And I felt serviced. I appreciated there was an actual arc with him as well. They actually move on his character from where we left off. And there is genuine change throughout this movie. Like, he's not just thrown in there. However, ultimately, it does feel like a forced attempt to utilize the nostalgia factor for me. It never really escaped that, and I think due to the fact that this timeline with him and Supergirl in just kind of gets forgotten. I think as simple as like a conversation after the fact would have given it a bit more weight, because it just feels like, yeah, forgotten about. And also just the obvious nostalgia lines, like the let's get nuts, like, why has he said that again? Like, I liked it, but what? But like I say, it's not a bad inclusion, and I'm glad he's there. I just do think it missed the mark ever so slightly for me. But I can't wait to see Muschietti's take on the Brave and the Bold, honestly. Ben Affleck's Batman isn't in the movie for long, but he is great while he's in there. He feels like a Batman almost returned to form after the trenches he was in the previous movies, which works after Justice League. I mean the Snyder Cut, because that appears to be the one that is canon in this timeline, because I think they mention about how Barry travelled back in time, and he only did that in the Snyder Cut. Although his suit in this film does look really ugly. But yeah, it's a nice progression, and weirdly, in that first act, it's the most connected this DC universe has ever felt. But then at the end, we get George Clooney.
No! No!
Which was amazing, to be honest. It got a real good laugh out of me, and I really didn't expect it, and it also kind of said to me, like, from DC, yeah, we're not touching this timeline again. So now we're going to get into what I like to call the yucky part of this movie. They didn't even want to mention Grant Gustin or John Wesley Shipp. Like, no reference in any capacity. You've got all these orbs flying around with literal screens of other characters, and you couldn't have even just thrown them in there? Like, and not even not like a line of dialogue. There's nothing. And I know some people think Teddy Sears is in it, and I thought it, but first of all, that doesn't make any sense. Like, it's just a random like, I think it's just a generic white man. And then to then have a cameo from Nick Cage's Superman, which is the one I actually liked, because whilst it looked horrendous, and I don't know why they didn't just get Nicolas Cage to do it, it was fun, and it is a bit of a DC inside joke that maybe not everyone will get, but it's still fun, and I liked it. But then we had a Christopher Reeve and a George Reeves cameo. And it is baffling that they would feel like it would be okay, especially to include George Reeves. Just look into it a little bit and you'll understand why, but it's really just stupid and, in my opinion, wrong, and I just hate to see it, really. And Christopher Reeve as well, and now I understand that I believe his family probably signed off, assumedly anyway, but even so, that doesn't totally make it okay for me. It just looks wrong, bringing him back with CGI, and also doing a Helen Slater Supergirl with CGI. It just feels wrong, just personally for me, bringing back dead actors using CGI, ultimately for entertainment purposes, and in such an egregious way like it does in this film, I'm just really not a fan of it. Don't bring back dead actors with CGI. It is just, it's not good. And I know there aren't bad intentions there, but that doesn't change the fact. If you wanted to use Christopher Reeve as well, or anything, just use archival footage. Don't recreate them using CGI. I don't like any of the cameos, really. Like I said, the George Clooney one I did like, and the Nicolas Cage one was fine, but in the matter of how all the main cameos happen, because we also see Adam West and a few other characters, but because it's literally opening a window for us to point and clap at, and it's the most lazy and uninteresting way to possibly do it. This world, and especially this film, does not earn that. If you want to do something like that, it almost has to feel like a reward for sticking with this universe, or the film that it's in, but this is nowhere near there. And if you want to include cameos like that, look at Spider-Verse. Spider-Verse did it really well. If you remove any of these cameos from this movie, it doesn't change. And in fact, the film would be better without them. The movie is ultimately a really mixed bag, and unfortunately, the more I think about it, the more I dislike it. There is good stuff in here, and there's a good Flash movie in here. Honestly, as the film went on, it just got worse for me. Just everything I didn't like just kept piling on top of each other. And then all culminated in one of the worst things I've ever seen, which was that cameo scene.